I won't touch it. Can you hear me? I'm gonna get my. This is very frustrating. So now what do we do? And the red end stream button is back again. For this 2 and this 3, the red end stream button is back. Haven't been able to eat all day because I've been so nervous. Today is not that day for anything stupid to go wrong. Planning this, for practicing this and writing all of this for 2 weeks. So what do we do? I was rambling way too much because I had a feeling there weren't really going to be any questions, and there weren't. And I don't think anybody's going to be interested if I tweet the link. Plus, I'm saying all of this and it's recording, so if it stays up, it's going to be ridiculous. Isn't that right? Do you think? But it's not going to, if I get it through one outline, it's not going to be together in one video, and it's going to, let me see, let me get over to that. I am on page, I only got to page 5 of 10 of my outline because I wrote as much as I could, trying to, use my hour. Oh, Stormy, hi. Stormy, give me hope. I did. I'm only on page 5 of 10 because I wasn't sure how many questions I was going to get. Oh, Stormy, thank you. I keep rereading your comment. Thank you. Stormy, I thought I had all of the practice out earlier this week when I kept making like 5 streams and like going through the motions of it all. Something weird happened, and I don't know. It's just, this is me. This is my life with technology. Well, well, let's see. I can start talking about where I think I left off, which was repeating themes. Okay, all right. I'll tweet it out if you think it'll be back. However, I now have 5 minutes and 52 seconds of me rambling, so that'll be in the archives. Hold on. Maybe I can edit that point out. Hold on. All right. Got the link. I'm going to the twit hole. Hi, Amy. Sorry, I was just sending a new link. I don't know. How'd you guys find the link? I don't know how any of this works. I don't know how any of this works. I know about some car stuff and some farm stuff and some wool stuff, and that's about it. What do I always say about the rambles, Chatterjack? I'm not sure. I'm all discombobulated now. Oh, okay. This one, okay. So I just posted that other one a minute ago. Where I'm assuming. Oh, okay. Thank you, Amy Blackfire. Yeah, I am. This is all new to me. I appreciate that answer. Thank you. Wait a minute. That means you're subscribed. Awesome. Thank you. Eight watching now. Who are you crazy people? Davos is not small folk. No, Davos is not small folk. I think what I said was he's like B+ right now. Thank you, Amy. I think what I was trying to say before things started dying was Davos is like B+ right now, and that in the third act of the book, which wins and Dream of Spring, yeah, so the third act is when Davos gets bumped up, and I think what I was saying is before with the small folk is that's one of the things that George has expanded on greatly that I appreciate him doing, because it changes the focus. It's just much bigger. Okay, that's where I cut out. Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking with Davos. Is right now he seems like a B+. He's not on. George has never mentioned him on his big 5, which I think when George bumped it up to like the big 6, which is like Jon and Bran, Dany, and it's Sansa was Arya, and then Sansa was the one that was added to that later as his big list. But I think in Act 3, which is Winds and Dream, that's when all of the practice stuff, all of the foreshadowing stuff from the first 2 acts of the story, that's when it comes into play, and that's when he'll be bumped up. And he's not going to be happy with Stannis, and I do think he's going to end up going with Jon. Yeah, I think before he was more like middle class, and he was raised to lordship. He made, yeah. Yes, I agree with you. He was more than a farmer, but still not rich. I mean, he had his boat, which takes some time and some money. And then the whole trading thing and negotiating things. So he's smart and he's clever. Yeah, so he's going to get bumped up. All of his practice, all of his backstory, all of his love of his wife, losing his kids, naming a child after Stannis, and then then losing these kids. Yeah, that's all gonna be like A-level stuff. Well, this is the thing, Amy. I'm going by your comment here that Davos was created because GRRM wanted a POV to show Stannis. That's where I see it a little bit different. Yes. Maria, yes. Davos is one of these, and maybe this is where I got cut off as well. Davos, it's what I was saying with the previous video about archetypes, is because George has these short, very small stories that give him this much literary space now or then. Now he has Ice and Fire with this much literary space. So he takes one previous archetype and he expands it into 2 or 3 for Ice and Fire. And he puts them in a very similar, I mean, almost word for word similar plot line now as they were before. The symbolism might be a little bit different, like it, instead of being following the watery line, now it's following a green line or something like that. But like the rhythm of the story, the dialogue of the story at the different plot points, they're the same. All of this is to say that one of the prototypes of Davos is Abner Marsh from Fever Dream. Abner has a lot of characteristics in common with Stannis, including they both count lightning and they both have their own issues with religion and religious zealots, and the whole ship issue. And then at one point, Abner even gets it's a housemaid, but it's a little bit of a glimpse of like a relationship that he's having that is there, but there's a little bit of distance between them. So it's like between Davos and his wife. Anyway, yeah, I don't think Davos is new, but still with Abner, you have to understand who Abner is up against, which is a fiery dragon person. So that's where he needed that's where he needed Abner and Davos to temper the Stannis Daemon Julian part. So Davos has been around for a long time. They say, I'm going to catch up on some of the other comments right now. Okay, let's see. I don't know if any of that makes sense. I'm trying to like catch back up to where I was. Can we talk about go back to talking about the repeating themes if there's no other questions about Davos? There's all of the ones that we know about. There's war and peace, love and betrayal, loyalty, honor versus personal choice, hard work versus power. Personal identity is huge. There's one thing that I've noticed that themes, woohoo, yes, absolutely. It's the foundation for the entire story. I don't know why anybody would ever skip them or downplay their importance. Yeah, everything has a consequence, and personal identity. That's where I was. Yeah, even if you look, when you start to look at sigils, when I talk about personal identity, okay, the season's out of whack. Remind me about that in a few minutes, Amy Blackfire. Even the personal sigils, that's part of the identity that people are going through. Bloodraven has his own personal sigil. So many of the Targaryens have their own personal sigil. When we think of the Stark banner, a lot of us are used to thinking of just like the dire wolf head on the like it. That is the HBO version, and the HBO version missed the whole point of Robb Stark having just a dire wolf head on his banner. That was a piece of very dark foreshadowing from George that of what Robb's and Grey Wind's fate was going to be. Yeah, even with like in Bloodraven, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, he actually rejected much of his Targaryen side. He said no, when his father tried to legitimize him, he said nope, and he did his own thing, and he even created his own sigil that was a merge of his parentage, but it's mostly about his own identity. Oh god, the name is just sometimes we see personal identity in the way people look. Like if there's somebody that's half Targaryen, they have just one silver streak in their hair. That sets them apart than regular Targaryens or regular Dornish people or whatever. But it's also the personal growth throughout the entire series. Like no character starts at the same way that they're going to end. Heroes and villains are not born, they're made. They're the result of their personal choices. Let me just look at some of my other notes on this real quickly. Yeah, everything has consequences. Oh, and then George likes to use thematic playing grounds. It's kind of what I think of it. Chess and football. Arya, when Arya is with Yoren before everybody's all burned down and consumed by Tywin's men. And Yoren's there, and he's taking the stick and drawing a picture of the lake, and he's doing all of these directions and things like that. That's actually a football play. George has lots of football plays in his books, and he actually wrote 2 football stories. I have them both in my reread section of my blog if you're interested. I can start adding links. Reread links. Making that note, or I will forget. Yes, and also identity being stolen or removed. There's one thing, and so Cambot. I'm gonna call you Cambot. So Cambot, the thing about Arya's name and Arya's name changing and her like shedding her what we think of at first as her shedding part of her Stark identity, because she goes through all of these different names and seems to be moving further and further away from her home, her pack, the whole pack survives thing that she thinks about often. It's funny is when she gets to the House of Black and White, and before she can even enter, she has to give her name. And if you notice, she actually goes backwards. And I think that's one of the first clues until she gets to Arya Stark. And I think that's one of the first hints to, even if they don't know it then, they're going to figure it out soon, that the House of Black and White they're going to realize that Arya still is Arya Stark. And she's going to work her way backwards to her starkness, to her home, to her pack. Yes, Saivas is chess mixed with all sorts of like weird fantasy stuff. I often joke sometimes that, you know, it's like that's another nod that George has to Star Trek with the, you know, the tri-D or tri-level chess. Yeah. And George has written a story. He calls it his chess story. It's called Unsound Variations, which is a time travel story whose main theme is revolves around chess. And what happens what happens if you try to go back in history and change things. So that's a good story to read if you think that Bran can go back in time and change things. I don't think he can the way that we think, or that a lot of people typically thinks that he can. I think Bran was always already there. Oh, some other people came back. Oh, hello again. Not touching anything, so nothing goes goofy this time. Yeah, timey-wimey stuff hurts my head too. I don't really like time travel stories, but in Unsound Variations, his chess story, he actually addresses a lot of the issues. Like, he's just straight up talks about some of the issues that I have with time travel stories, about like, well, if you go back, then you mess this up, and if you go back, you mess this up, and blah 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 blah, blah. And he actually takes more of a I know there's different terms for time travel, like loops, and he keeps it more linear, I guess you can say. Oh yes, and Under Siege. Not so much the Fortress, but Under Siege. Under Siege is the follow-up to the Fortress. Yes, that's another one of his time travel stories, where you can go back in time, but only certain people, and then certain things, when you change things, everything in the future or the now changes. So let's see. Is Ice and Fire always in conflict in his prior work, or are they treated as standalone threats? No, they're pretty much well, if they are together on the same in the same story, they are always in conflict. But I'll get to that a little bit more in a minute, because it's usually just the green element. There's usually just a green element, and the green element is against one of these ice or fire things. I see Ice and Fire is needing to be in balance, hence my original. Yes. And this is kind of where I'm going with this. The green person, the green element, it's usually green and water is the person. They are the one that's in the middle of the struggle, because it's usually some like red fire element that's coming in that's totally screwing up, like in or screwing things up, like in Seven Times Never Kill Man. You have the Steel Angels. Well, first you have the like fiery pyramids, and then you have the Steel Angels come in, and the pyramids have this sort of like mind control over the Jianshi, the natives that are there. Now, some people think that the natives like changed over time, which if they did or if they didn't, I don't think that's really. I think what the main thing is, it's this nature part that's having to fight against these fire dragons that are coming in. They're not literal dragons, they're steel angels. I have this story transcribed with a lot of the back notes from George on what this means. yeah, if you want to see something that is exactly like the Faith of the Seven and the Targaryens, it's the Steel Angels, and coming in and trying to supplant themselves to where and getting the worship. They want that. Same. There's even a little bit on the other side with the ice, with embittered blooms. The ice is still mixed with like a fire, so it's like a blue fire type of thing going on. But yeah, that's very manipulative against the native little Sean, who's the protagonist of the story. So it's generally one green element, one green person that's against one of these two types of dragons. The dragons we have in A Song of Ice and Fire are the two extremes. It has almost nothing to do with the animal dragons at all, especially since George was not ever really planning on using them in the beginning. That's just a stand-in for, like he's used before, especially in Armageddon Rag. And there's even a video that I bookmarked, but it got mixed in with so many other videos I've been watching lately, where the dragons represent out of balance controlling features. Like one of them is corporate control and one of them is governmental control. Is the easiest way to say that. Armageddon Rag lays it all out. And the government side often is with the fire pyramid triangle political side, because they work together, they control each other, they control the small folk. So once these two extreme dragon extremes are taken care of, that's when things go back to normal. Yes, and yeah, the whole, yes, Cambot, the whole fire can be frozen thing. Yes, like obsidian. So what am I drinking to? Notice I'm not really hesitating, but right, without the pyramids, back to In Seven Times Never Kill Man, which is based on Rudyard Kipling's poem. They revert back to nature when they're not near the pyramids or the pyramids are destroyed. That's one of the clues that something is going wrong with the mind control in that story, is when you become transfixed with the worship and of these pyramids. You get these like gold flecks in your eyes. But like I said, like Jill said, if you move away from them, things go, you go back to normal. Okay, yeah, Amy, with the Taoist comment that I see, right? It's balance. And when I say that the dragons are the extremes and it always goes back to the green, that doesn't mean that the green itself is utopia. There's the normal range of things. You're still going to have love and hate and death and birth, but those are all part of the normal cycle of things. If there's a science that works in Ice and Fire, it's the rhythm of nature. It's what I'm talking about are like the real extremes. There is a video, and George has talked about this a couple times, but there's what I'm thinking of in particular is a video George did an interview with Al Jazeera TV a few years ago, 5 years ago at this point, I think. And the interviewer he asks him, like, what does the title mean? And the Song of Ice and Fire is essentially, it's the Battle of Ice and then the Battle of Fire. So, there might be some like secondary meanings behind the title, but he's laying it right out for us every time we say ASOIAF, we're restating what the point of the story is, which actually that was something that was my next talking point, was a topic. The topic is another huge anchor piece of a story. It's very explicit. It's the main title. It's written as the heading of the work. It's the focus. That's what the Song of Ice and Fire is. A song is a battle, the battle of ice and then fire. So, yeah, for a lot of people that think that the ice dragon others are like the main bad guys, that's sort of like step one, because the other extreme dragon has to be taken care of as well. And it's in the title. That is the topic. Yes, the focus, which, it regulates the direction of the literature. And I was, in my notes, I was reminded of ironically, of Stannis's comment about a good act does not wash out the bad, nor does a bad act the good. Each should have its own reward. So that's what the green element tends to be. Also, you can't just take care of one extreme and not the other. You're still out of balance. Also, part of the topic and the three rivers. Sorry, I'm like checking notes really quickly. Yep, every time we see red and green and blue, yep, the three rivers in the Riverlands. You're exactly right, Jill. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Cam. There's so much to discuss. This is in the first videos that I was saying, this is the very beginning of anything. There's a lot of meat going to be left on these discussion bones. Stormy about the imaginary comma. Yeah. I see what you mean. Yep. So one more issue about, not issue. I'm saying what I'm reading. One more point about the topic of a story is that supports, again, the idea of what the title is about, that this title is telling us what's going on, is at it was like the end of summer, beginning of fall, back in 2019, when the world was normal. It was one of the interviews with George in Chicago, and one of the, and I can find this again, and I can post it in these notes here to this video if you want. Chicago video. Somebody asked him, the interviewer asked him, what's, we know that you're a historian. We know that you draw your inspiration from comics and history and Arthurian legend. And like, he mentioned a few things, and he asked him, he said, but what is your story all about? And George straight up said, he said, this is a war story at heart. So, yeah, we're going through it. I mean, Arya in the Riverlands is our camera for that, especially. And then Brienne, since we don't really have a small folk POV, they are essentially the camera lens for that. They're the ones that show us that we should be worried for these people. We should, it's not about who's going to sit the throne, because the throne is Ozymandias anyway. We don't have to worry. We shouldn't be worried about who's sitting on the throne. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is the small folk, the free folk even. Those are the people, not these big government and corporate agencies, essentially. Okay. Another recurring story element that George uses over and over again, that he, depending on the setting, he tweaks it the way he needs to. Like I said in the first video, it could be a it could be a blaster gun in one story, but it's a sword in another story. It could be the wings from Windhaven, the flyer wings from Windhaven in one story, but it's Dawn and the sword Dawn in A Song of Ice and Fire. So these are, oh, sorry, I skipped myself ahead a little bit. Let me get over to it. Yeah, these are the supporting, these different plot mechanisms or the support the theme and the character archetypes and where they're going through the story. And this is where and why, once I started reading A Song of Ice and Fire, and I started to remember back to these other stories or these other television shows, and I started to realize, I'm like, wait a minute, this is all from the same guy. And then that's when all of these books, I started buying all of George's books. It's something that it takes a couple of different stories of his, stories that have endings. That is not a knock against T-Wow not being out. That's not a knock about Dream of Spring being iffy. But when you have a bunch of his stories that have endings, so you see the result of all this stuff over and over again. And I slightly lost my train of thought. The first chapter starts with Justice. And in my opinion, Bran's last chapter, the last scene he sees with the guy getting his neck slit, that might not be some bloody sacrifice for the sake of bloody sacrifice. That is that's a hanging element from Bran's first lesson, which was how to be a leader. He's learning right ways and wrong ways to do things. So Bran's looking back and way back in history. That's what happened with the Green Kings. Moving on is very green. Yeah, I agree, Shatterjack. Moving on is very green. All right, so some recurring plot devices or plot mechanisms that I see. These aren't necessarily like the main themes. These are just the things that happen in the scenery to set the stage and to emphasize and underline which archetype you're reading. The Darkling Plane, the Darkling Sea, the whole Darkling existence. That is something that he has used a lot over his different stories. We see it with Danny. Even if he's not explicitly saying, this is the Darkling Sea, you have to understand what's happening. He'll say it in one chapter, but then he'll show it in a different chapter. So, you have to this is one of the areas where you have to sort of like pay attention. It's not always about like the ink that's on the page. It's about, the story that's happening. Really quickly. Jill, I think the Green series used to be judges. Yeah, I think they were the ones that you went to when some sort of justice or judgment needed to happen. And you're absolutely right. You can't lie in front of trees. Yes, witnesses and record keepers. Yep, that thing. That's the whole library. I'm trying not to use the words symbolism or symbology or anything like that. That's libraries and trees, and that's on my list down on here somewhere. It's actually coming up on my list. Libraries are trees, and towers. They're all the same damn thing. So, yeah, yes. Okay, so back to the plot mechanisms. The Darkling Plane, this whole idea, and part of the poem was taken from, was used very explicitly in Song for Laya, but there's another story or two where he also refers to this to this poem, the one Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. And let's see. And yeah, one of the most common explanation, or that's not the word, explanations for the analysis of the poem and its meaning is it's somebody that's talking to their wife. And if you look at it in Song for Laya, that's when it starts to come up, and Lyanna starts to mix it with another poem, and she's speaking this to Rob, who is her not necessarily husband, but her partner. They both have psionic psi-link talents, but their minds operate very differently. And then let's see, it says the last stanza, I'll read it to you really quickly. It says, "Ah, love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy nor love nor light, nor certitude nor peace, nor help or pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night." So especially I'm really liking the last two lines. Swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. So it's right. The darkling plane is a liminal space, and he does use it. And when Lyanna comes to Rob, that's exactly where she is. She is coming to him mentally. She's in on the darkling plane, in that darkling space. It's another one of these thin spots that you see in fantasy. And it's a lot of struggle. It's a lot of pain. Yeah. It's kind of like before you walk all the way through that veil of death, that's where you are, where you're contemplating for I just see Cambot. I just saw you said that, you said behind the veil. Right. I agree. It's like it's that last hold before you go on to the veil of death, or pass all the way through the veil of death. Okay, so another very common plot mechanism, little playground, like I said, were the pyramids, but pyramids aren't just pyramids. Pyramids are also pyre fires, like Drogo's fire, the fires that Melisandre lights, and they're also volcanoes. So it depends on which story you're reading. Again, like I said, what the setting is what it's what fits the best. And sorry, I'm reading some notes. So pyramids, pyre fires, volcanoes. Think of Valyria, what happened in Valyria. The Dany going to the Mother of Mountains. That's going to be her. She's going to be that fiery dragon up there. That's going to be her volcano, essentially. That's her last stop before she fully commits and realizes that she is the dragon, and that's where essentially she's going to launch from before she goes back to Meereen and wherever else, and then back to Westeros. And like I said, I think in the first video, Cyrene from The Glass Flower, dragons on top of pyramids are volcanoes. Yes. Even in Seven Times Never Kill Man, with the pyramids at the end, you get to Bacalon. If anybody knows me, you know how much I talk about Bacalon. You get to Bacalon, and Bacalon is a little naked child with a sword that stands at the top of these pyramids, and that is Dany. That is 100% Dany. And I have a whole page written about it. If you want, I will add that link to the notes here. Yeah, Victarion has essentially a lava hand at this point. Because he's going to Dany. He's going to be one of her fiery hands. But instead of the religious side, it's going to be more the army, military side. Specifically C, because that's what she needs. Let's see. Oh yeah, and also the Cyrene from the Glass Flower. She's in an obsidian pyramid, which is like Dragonstone. Think about it. It's the house of the Targaryens, and all the obsidian, different color boulders and rocks of obsidian that are underneath. House of the Worm is a pyramid, and House of the Worm, with all of the dragons and tunnels and diggings and stuff underneath. And up top is where it has the obsidian walls for pyramid. And he's really been using this same idea since 1965 with one of his first stories, Only Kids Are Afraid of the Dark. And yeah, the point of the pyramids, pyre, fire, volcano thing is that serves the one. That is one of the History of Westeros. Thank you for coming to part 4 at this point. We had some major technical issues, even though I practiced several times this week. So good to see you. Thank you for dropping by. Okay, now I lost my point again. See, all of this cognitive training, retraining the last couple months. The pyramid, fire, volcano thing, that whole R'hllor thing, it serves the one. R'hllor is a greedy, hungry god, and we hear that a lot through the story, but we hear that in all of the other stories where these same plot mechanisms are used. It feeds the one. That's where you get the worship. They want the worship. Trust me, the Ice Dragon others are doing their very similar thing, just ice style. Slavery. This is always a really, really, really touchy subject because everybody likes to go straight to thinking that George is rewriting American history somehow, and he's writing it as in correcting it because atrocious things happened in our history, which is an absolute fact. Except he's really not. It's kind of like the Tolkien comment about allegory, or his stories allegory, and he says, no, they're not allegory, but that's not the whole quote. The whole quote goes on to say that just because it's not an allegory doesn't mean it's not applicable. So yes, we see some horrible things that are happening, and we want these slaves to be freed because it applies to us here and now, in our own history. George is not doing a one-to-one with this. He has both mental and physical slavery, and the mental slavery comes with worship. So somebody might break a chain, but if they're gaining worshipers in at the same time, they're really just kind of switching one thing out for another. Again, this goes the pyramids from And Seven Times Never Kill Man. They want the worship. Simon Cress, who is another fiery Dany prototype as far as the character development, he straight up says in Sand Kings, I want the worship. Daemon Julian, that's one of the strongest comparisons. Daemon Julian in Fever Dream, he's talking to Abner and he's talking to Josh York, and he's like, the humans are cattle, but you treat them like slaves, and that's really wrong. Why would you do that? That's really wrong. So Daemon Julian, he's acting all high and mighty, like I'm above the physical bondage of slavery, but then he literally turns right around and he exhibits these very strong mental chains over his group of vampires. And oh god, the word is leaving my head right now, but yeah, he even uses the phrase, or very similar phrase, like, these are the blood of my blood. Right. Oh, okay. History of Westeros. Yeah, I'm looking at the pyramids wanted the worship, and they almost they didn't really care who you were, whether you were Jayanchi or whether you were the Steel Angels. You got close to them, and they emitted some sort of mind control, coercion. And that's when you see in the story, like, people start getting the gold flecks in their eyes. So you have a connection to the color gold, you have a connection to the worship, you have a connection to these fiery pyramids with Bacalon. Again, every time I say Bacalon, I giggle because I love Bacalon. Yeah. Dany freeing the slaves, she's really gathering, except for the whole Mary Maz thing in the beginning, she's really gathering an army, and she's gathering an army that worship her. And that's going to be problematic. So that is a topic for, like, I think a standalone video instead, because there's no way to touch on all of this and get every book quote from every story. I've started to on one of my pages and on my own blog, but I know not everybody has time to sit and read that stuff anymore. Let's see what else. Oh, the whip. The Harangans, thank you, History of Westeros. I have them on my page right there, that the Harangans are very, 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 very close prototypes for Valyrians in general. And they use the Haroon as essentially their slaves. And they're war, legions of war, and things like that, the people or the creatures that go out and actually fight the battles. Yes. Yeah, especially when you look at Valyria, like, and the map of everywhere that they've gone, and the Rhoynar and so many other cultures that were fleeing the dragons. It's because it was bow or burn, and people didn't want to bow. So they had to flee the dragon fire. And again, if you kind of look at Dany's travels, she's kind of doing the same thing. She's hitting the same points. So, and a theme with that, again, goes back to, it serves the one. Dany going through these different cities and burning the masters and getting these armies that worship her. You don't steal from the dragon. Viserys taught us this in the beginning. As awful as Viserys is, he has lessons that Dany often refers back to. You don't steal from the dragon. So Dany taking the Unsullied, who are form themselves in the ways of old geese, that's reclaiming what the Valyrians lost. She's reclaiming these things. So she's not even really 100% freeing them as so much as the dragon is reclaiming, because you don't steal from the dragon. I'm just checking some notes real quickly. Okay, so what else? Another repeating plot mechanism, dragons. And I had a recent thread on the Twitter thing about this. their vehicles, and George has used them as cars before, and it's kind of funny. It's kind of cute, especially because I'm a car lover. So when he describes it, I'm like, oh yeah, I get that. Yeah, but dragons, vampire spelled with an I or vampire spelled with a Y. Fighter jets, blast cannons. There's blast cannons in Seven Times Never Kill Man. That's the same way as that are used the same way as the Targaryen king down in Dorne that used these wooden blast cannons. Yeah, the skin trade and the steel angels, and that's where I mentioned the Harangan Targaryen thing. I won't go back over that again. Yeah, Targaryen fire dragons is that extreme. It's the government political overreach, and that's what madness means. A lot of people get upset with the idea of a mad queen or using madness with the females in the story. George is not really using it like that. It's not a sexist thing, actually. The Twitter thing. He uses it pretty evenly through all of his stories, and it has nothing to do with gender, has nothing to do with like mental health. Madness in his world, in Martinworld, has to do with craving and wanting power. It's power related. So Tywin is our example for this. I don't think somebody might call Tywin mad, but he's our example for wanting this power. He's mad, and he's smart, and he's clever, and he's ruthless, and those are not the traits that make him mad. It's his want for power, especially wanting the throne in some way. Let's see, and I think I even counted it. Yeah. Just doing a quick search in both Dream Songs 1 and 2. It's these two books there, right there. In Dream Songs 1 and 2, he says it no less than 51 times. And Dream Songs, these two books, those only include about 40% of his stories. Those are all of George's other stories. And so if you count in all of those other times that he uses madness to explain or the desire for power, I mean, you're looking at like 100 different times, and it is all across the board with person type. What is it? Weekend in a War Zone. Read that one. That's a short one. That's an easy one. And that's actually one that was reissued relatively recently in the Night Flyers book up there. That shows the absolute spiral into madness. And it's over war, and it's over power. Yes, I am agreeing with you, History of Westeros. Oh, madness in the shape brain. Poor Aegon. It's terrible. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, some of the other stories where he uses this is Armageddon Rag and Night of the Vampires and Meat House Man and Seven Times Never Kill Man. That's where some of the ones that it's very explicitly on display. This is something too. My next page notes. This is something too. It kind of reminds me of what Melisandre often says, or something she would say. Kill them and let the Lord set them out. That's part of the Albigensian Crusade. That's part of the Cathars and stuff that George says went into, with Zoroastrianism, went into creating the R'hllor religion. Yeah, kill them all and let the Lord set them out, or sort them out. It's very similar as in the same way that it's only the fire elemental people, religion associated things or people in the story. They're the only ones that say only death pays for life. So that's a little bit of an out of balance thing as well, as we were talking about earlier. All right, here we go. The towers and trees and libraries. That comes from the Academy of Human Knowledge from Thousand Worlds. And in the first video, if anybody is here now that missed it, I went on probably too long of a spiel about how Thousand World, Song of Ice and Fire is not secretly in Thousand Worlds. It's not secretly sci-fi. But all of George's works are sort of meshing together like this big clay ball into Planetos. So that's why we see so many things being twerked and tweaked and perfected along his writing career. The whole thing with this being A Song of Ice and Fire being his magnum opus, yes, he's taking the best of what he likes, of what he wants to read, and he's mashing it together. So Academy of Human Knowledge is the tower tree library thing from his previous works. Even the Needle Tower in Song for Laya, that's the tree, because that has the library in it. And plus its needle, the tower is referred to as the Needle Tower, which is like Arya and her sword. And it's all about the memory. The trees remember. Sometimes it's a mission moves them, but it's about power. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's about feeding the one versus feeding the many, serving the one versus serving the many. Let's see. Oh, another tower tree library thing is in Night Flyers. Royd Eris, behind his wall, he's in a library cabin. So he's another one of these. So it's, I mean, you can see where George got the idea that Blood Raven had to connect to the library system. Again, it's something he's been using a lot in all of his works. Blood Raven's not totally new to Song of Ice and Fire. Another story, oh God, I'm trying to remember it now, that literally the guy is in a sleeping bag. So he's like a worm at the bottom of the tree, and he does this like mental time trip, but he's using a drug instead. So like the weirwood paste is For a Single Yesterday. Sorry, I have like 80 stories I'm trying to remember. It's my cheat list right there. Yeah, and then For a Single Yesterday, he does these time trips, and he goes back into history, and he tries to learn something to help the future. Doesn't always work out, but let's see. Oh, in Fever Dream, the story Fever Dream, the ship is named Fever Dream. The Fever Dream in the first half of the story is the Weirwood. Joshua York even has his own cabin. That is the library. And the Fever Dream ship in the very beginning is even described with sort of loosely like some possible Lyanna type things. It's the smokestacks are like flowers, and they're silver and blue and stuff like that. So I don't know. That one might be a little bit of a stretch, but the ship being a weirwood symbol, looking forward to Into a Song of Ice and Fire. That's what that is. The ship becomes Ozymandias. Literally, what George has said the Iron Throne is about halfway through the story. And it's painted, it's changed. So again, we're going back to our color scheme that you guys were talking about a little while ago. It becomes red and black. And then that's when it floats on the river of blood. And a lot of some of those things are metaphors, but there's even mirrors. I'm going to get to mirrors in a minute, but there's even blood in the mirrors and all of that with the whole Daemon Julian dragon thing, blah, blah, blah. So the trees idea from in Weirwoods from Ice and Fire, again, they've been there. They've been there since the beginning. Depends on the setting. It does, but you'll see the same thing over and over again, and even play out the same. There's no evil Weirwoods in any of the previous stories. Just saying, just putting it out there. Oh yeah, so the whole point of the Tower Tree Library Weirwood thing is it's a device that serves the many, but it also often requires self-sacrifice. So if any of you know me, you know I'm not a huge proponent of Jojen paste. I think Jojen actually is eating Weirwood, which is Bloodraven, because that's part of what you do in the North. You sacrifice yourself to feed the next in line, the next generation, you know, the whole seed sapling growing thing that Bran is right now. And again, if you think back to For a Single Yesterday, like I said, the guy's sitting like a worm in his sleeping bag at the bottom of a tree, and he's using a drug to time trip. And that's why I think the drug is related to the tree and the Weirwood sap type of thing, and not necessarily Jojen. But that's a different story. All right, let me check some of these notes really quickly. But serving the many and losing yourself is not clearly better in the text either. Now we still have some to go, but yeah, For a Single Yesterday, and I have that one on my reread section in my blog. If you don't have a copy of it and you want to read it, that is part of the tragedy of what happens. However, there is a future next generation that goes on. And this is where if you look back, you get lost idea also first shows up in George's writing. It's not necessarily the looking back that's the problem. It's the getting lost. You can look back. You should look back, because you look back. That's what the whole History of Ice and Fire book, World of Ice and Fire history book, is all about. It's a look back, because what's happening there is going to happen again. That's what Bran needs to be able to see what happened before, so he can help the future. Yeah, Royd he's a Bloodraven library type guy. Yeah, Bloodraven, Bran, John library type guy. Yes, and I can't remember if I mentioned it in this video or the previous one, but the story Only Kids Are Afraid of the Dark, I'd really seriously recommend, even though it's not as well written as some of his later stories, read that story, because that lays down so much groundwork for what he uses again and again. Let me just see something real quickly. I think it's just down to us three guys. 3 or 4 of us. Let's see. All right, Whisper Jewels. Whisper Jewels, they are not just jewels. If anybody is looking for like literally just a jewel for Whisper Jewel, they're missing them. It's like an Easter egg hunt. And they're not limited to the Thousand Worlds. Hosea is a Whisper Jewel. Sandra's cloak is a Whisper Jewel. Needle is a Whisper Jewel. Abner's gravestone is a Whisper Jewel. Paintings from portraits of his children are a Whisper Jewel. The thing is the function behind it. And there's many more. That was not an all-inclusive list. Yeah, soul jars. I'm picking up what you guys are putting down. I love it. It's not necessarily the object. Like, this is not a Whisper Jewel throughout all of his work because it was a Whisper Jewel in one story. No, it's the function. They've been psionically etched. They're full of emotion. They're full of connection. They're full of heat and passion. They're just some memory. And they can be misused. If you remember, or if you guys have read, and if you remember, like, the beginning of Dying of the Light, what's his face sends a Whisper Jewel, but it's a false calling. So it was a manipulation. So anything can be manipulated. Like, there's the same magic is in everything. It's a choice in how you use it. Let's see. Ice and mirrors. This is one of my questions from Sandra from Twitter. Hi. Yeah, objects that trigger memories. Yes. Yep. And even Melantha Jurl, she has her green. She has a green whisper jewel, which I can't remember if it was this video or the previous first practice video, where Melantha is the Val to Royd as the John. So Val and John, and Melantha has a green whisper jewel, and I think that's one. I think it's the only time we hear of a green one. And Val's Weirwood pin, that's also a whisper jewel. That's the Ice and Fire version of it. Drink. Why do you keep telling me to drink? Oh, mirror. I know, that is you. Hi, Stormy. Okay. Mirrors is another very, very common one. Let's see. All right. Mirrors are what lets the dragons through. That is their doorway. So, like before, what I was saying is Corlos, with this video or the previous one, what Corlos is, that is something that George established way back in Only Kids Are Afraid of the Dark. Corlos was a world where these like black and red demon things come through. So in Ice and Fire, like when you have Corlys Penny saying "Open the gates," when Corlys, it's always something that's related to a dragon. Corlys Valerian with his dragon side, things like that. So Corlos up in the north is one to keep an eye on. That is one at the wall with John. That whole situation, that's one to keep an eye on. And I'm just reading your silly comments. Yeah, so that's how they come through. Okay. Or they use them as like a scrying device. That is the ice is like Melisandre using her flames, but the ice version. So it can be like a scrying device, or how it lets the dragons through. Let's see. Even in Armageddon Rag even has a guy named Mirrors. I mean, you really can't get any more obvious than some of this stuff. His name is Mirrors because he wears these glasses that are like mirrors, and he works for Ananda. Ananda Kane is the Dany Melisandre red and black character of that story that wants to burn everything down for the movement to rebuild things as she wants it. She doesn't give anybody a choice. And there's a huge discussion about about choice as Sandy is up on the top of the tower weighing his options. And it's good. That's Armageddon Rag is one that I've been waiting to get back to badly. I'm almost finished doing Sand Kings. So I think after I finish Sand Kings later this week, I'm going to go back to Armageddon Rag. All right. Anyway, Ice Mirrors. Armageddon Rag has a mirrors guide. The skin trade has, you get blood on the mirrors, you call the Skinner. The Skinner is essentially what is going to be the Ice Dragon, great other thing coming through the wall in Westeros. The wall is the biggest mirror in Westeros, as it's often referred to. There's mirrors in the Fever Dream that get blood on them when Daemon Julian comes along and starts mucking things up. The haunted intruder from Remembering Melody, blood gets on the mirrors, and then this haunted intruder comes into the dude's apartment. They are doorways, and here is where I recommend that you either read the script, which is in Dream Songs 1, I think, the script to Doorways, or it's on YouTube. The pilot, the film quality is horrible, but you can see that the bad dragon guys, and I have on the twit hole, I have a short list or thread about Doorways, the show, the TV show, the story and TV show. This is a black and red dragon hunter guy, and they come through doorways. It's like an opening, shimmering mirror thing that opens up, and they go through doorways. And there's even a scene in a bathroom where the mirror is important. Oh, and also Lonely Songs of Laren Door. When the Seven is chasing Shara, they come through the doorways. Yes, the Seven. I said the Seven. It's like the religious thing again with the Seven and the Targaryens. Dany, they're gonna essentially be this one by the end, or at least the extreme side of the Seven is. I know Cersei's going to do her thing, but there's some Maegor conflict in there. Anyway. Mary Mazdor is, I've talked about this before. That's like a play on words with Mirror Mazdor, which comes from the skin trade, which again, you get blood on the mirrors, the dragon comes through. You get blood on the mirrors, the skinner comes through. That's what happens to Mary. That is part of her role being attached to the fire pyramid. Is she's one of the keys to open the doorway for the dragons to come through. And, a crack. It was a crack in the world when the dragons were born again. That's exactly what that is. Lamau Twill. Yeah, sorry. I'm just reading some of your comments again real quickly. Yeah, very blue, Cambot, very blue. Blood on the Silver Dothraki Sea. Yeah, it's they get the red flowers certain time of year. Yep, it's flooded with blood on the rivers, blood on the waters. Okay. Actually, I'm getting pretty close to the end now. Oh God, we've been going for over an hour. Woo. Do you guys have any other questions really quickly? Because I think I've hit a lot of my main topics because I was trying to leave some room for other questions, but I've been rambling so much. Do I have to drink? Did I say rambling again? Do I have to drink? Is that what that is? It's just tea. It's caffeinated tea too. Don't tell my doctor. Looking at your comments, catching up. All right. So I guess just to wrap up for myself at the moment, my favorite. Oh wait, my brain is stuck on thinking about other spiritual types of memory in A Song of Ice and Fire. Yeah, it's yeah. I don't think there are too many of them. It's probably something reserved for more of the A-level type of characters, but they're definitely there. I mean, and there's different ones. The story actually starts. One of the lessons that we learned from Viserys pretty early in the series is the dragons remember, and then the trees remember, and then the time is the whole time is a river thing. It's always flowing and flowing. So there's probably slightly different variations on them depending on their plot purpose, but they're there. No, I don't think there's in A Song of Ice and Fire, Shadowjack, I don't think they're necessarily a magical power like they are in Thousand Worlds. Like, you're not like with Melantha when she's working out and she's getting herself kind of excited, like her whisper jewel is like moving, like there's something going on there, and it's having a reconnection with her. That's what's been etched. Where like with Sansa, she's just like picking up Sandor's cloak and remembering at that point. When Arya's holding Needle, she's talking it out. That's it's I don't think it's necessarily literally like magic or like magic. Yeah, it is a nice rabbit hole. And I don't think they're, I mean, it's even more of just a fun connection than I don't think there's going to be much more about them aside from they might go back to those objects as their plot is making a transition. And however their plot transitions, we can guess, we can make some pretty, educated assumptions and speculations about it. But only George knows, really. Yes, Jill, I almost put that in here. I almost went crazy with the camo cloth. Yes, needle is the big one. Jill, I almost went totally crazy, and I could do a whole thing about the chameleon cloth that George uses from Thousand Worlds and some other variations and other stories into Song of Ice and Fire. Yes, the others are wearing chameleon cloth. Rohan Weber is wearing chameleon cloth. Cersei, when she's meeting with Ned in the garden, she's wearing chameleon cloth. Yes, that is definitely that's a big one. Yes, that's one of my favorites. Yes, I've rambled about that as well. So I guess some of my favorite story. You guys keep going, keep talking. I know those cloaks are in. Oh yes, the war. Yes, yep. And I think there's even something about them in Zelazny's Nine Princes in Amber. There's something about cloaks in there too. It's been about a year and a half, maybe 2 years since I've read that one. But yeah, I think there's something about like cloaks in there as well. I mean, it's a fantasy thing, so and it seems like a lot of these authors that were contemporaries and hanging out all the time at different conventions and stuff, like they're sitting around in hot tubs and whatnot, and they're talking about this stuff, and they're getting the same ideas, just their own ways. So yeah, Jon's blood being spilled on the wall, the largest wall, or the largest mirror in Westeros. Yeah, that's a biggie. That's a biggie. Yep. I've gone on about that too in the past. All right, so some of my other favorite short stories of George's. Meat House Man is my favorite. I know it's not everybody's favorite. If they've even read it, they kind of think it's weird and it's icky and gross and whatnot. Drives me insane when people say stuff like that. I actually had the chance to have a conversation with George about this story, and he has essentially described it to me as like something out of his diary. Like, this is a story very, very close to him, and it took somebody like Harlan Ellison to really drag it out of him the right way without holding back. Huge themes all over the place in Meat House Man. It's not even literal. It's like vignette. But there is a common thread. That one's actually, and the reason why I talked to him about this movie, this story in particular, is because I find it to be very emotional, and apparently he appreciated that I saw that. And yeah, the mind thing. Yeah, so he kind of opened up a little bit about it, which I was like, oh, thank you, that was very touching. Let's see. Fever Dream is definitely one of my other favorite stories. Don't even get me started on that epilogue. I slightly mentioned it earlier. It's all I can say without turning into a blubbering mess. The glass flower is yes. All yes. Danny is in there. Euron is in there. Misusing the weirwood net is in there. Yeah. A song for Laya, just because we get with the Grishka, we get such a great prototype for fire and lava and magma and stuff like within the volcano, these fire gods that are the Grishka that consume. Remember, fire is, or R'hllor is a hungry god. It's always, it's greedy and taking things for himself. That's one that I have transcribed and probably probably heavily noted. I try not to note too many things, but probably heavily noted on that one. I just love it. And with Morning Comes Mistfall, I think would be, with Morning Comes Mistfall is, and I just coincidentally yesterday, I think it was, the guys down in Brazil did another podcast about George's old stories, and they did with Morning Comes Mistfall, and I just love that story because that is, like I said online, that's one of those like fourth wall breaking stories where George is telling us not everything is going to be answered. And Shatterjack, I know that doesn't really make you happy, but I don't know, it's who we signed up for. So but I like it, it gives us stuff to talk about when we read the story or the words "the end." We still get to talk about things. Oh, let's see. So why do I like his work? You guys keep talking. I'm just going to talk. His writing is very poetic. He uses a lot of poetry, like real and in world, that reflect. Well, it does. It's doing what poetry is supposed to do. It's like it's reflecting the characters. It's an outward a dialogue of what's going on in the inside. So all of his stories, they're not always perfect. There are bumps in them. There are things that we ask if it was a retcon, or did he forget about this, and are we going to get conclusions to this, or I would have written it differently because that seems complicated, but it's engrossing, and it makes you ask and wonder, why is he doing this? I was just about to say that. History of Westeros. Oh, where's my notes? I was just about to say that. Oh shoot, I just lost my thing. He writes from a place of his truth, which is why I love Maid House Man so much. And that's what it was. And they said, in some of his most quotable, it's some of the most quotable lines in fiction. So I was just about to say the exact same thing, History of Westeros. Thank you for that. It's one of the things, it's one of the works of fiction, whether both book and show, or one or the other, where you can say something in just about any situation and somebody else will know what you're talking about. One of my favorite things to say from the series is lies in Arbor Gold, and every once in a while somebody like reacts to it, and I'm like, yeah, I know you're my people. Yes, Jinx. So like as I was saying in the beginning of the other video, the whole point of trying to do this, if people are even interested, is it's mainly to encourage reading. But it's so if you read another George story, or another story that's related to a George story or not, if you finally read Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny, then that makes me happy, because I do have a literary connection in my background. So that's Twinkle's one of my stars. Stormy, I'm catching up on your comment. For War of the Worlds, I know you have a fantastic theory going with that, and I love it. Off the top of my head, there's not much I can think of that where War of the Worlds is in his old work. There's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some other Orson Welles stuff, or but I'd have to give it some real thought and not just sit here on dead air as I try to think that. But I'll write it down. Okay, I wrote it down. Yeah, Lord of Light is probably my favorite. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan of that story. I listen to it if I can't actually sit to read it. I listen to it at least once a year. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so some of my other closing notes were that I'm close to finishing up my reread, my noted reread of Sand Kings, and I will post that. But other than that, unless you guys have any other questions, I'm totally open to if this works, if people are interested in it or not. Like, if people want to continue discussing George's old work, either one stream per story or just overall themes and notations. Naturally, we're always going to compare it to Song of Ice and Fire. That's, we all want the ending to Song of Ice and Fire. We all want to understand a little more where George is going with this. So I'm open to it. You don't have to answer it right now. You can send me a message. You can post a message when this is done. Oh, the interregnum drink. Yeah, the interregnum. Long story short on that one, the interregnum, yeah, that's another reason why you know that Ice and Fire is not secretly sci-fi or secretly in Thousand Worlds, is because the interregnum is the upcoming Long Night. And just fantasy Ice and Fire version of it. So we see these two extreme dragons, like we were talking about before. That's like the Harangans, and the whites are like the Haroon, or the Unsullied, or Dothraki, however it actually works out. We have these two extremes that are coming to us. That is going to bring the Long Night. And it's only after the interregnum, the AI, that humans relearn flight. And that's what, when Bloodraven tells Bran that he'll never walk again, he'll fly. That's the biggest clue to that, to anybody that knows George's previous works. That is flight. Flight is returning, not literally, but we might start to see some hints of technological advances finally in Ice and Fire. I'm not talking computers or UFOs or anything. We might start to see not just societal advances, but some technological advances, a combination of both, of all of it. And yeah, that's what flight is. That's why Bran can fly. That's how we know Bran is going to be I don't think it's going to be king. I think king is not the right thing. Not the right term, not even the right position. He's going to be the leader, whatever that's going to be. It's also something that's we can draw hints from Windhaven. That was their advancement, was learning to fly. And they take their wings from a ship and Woodwings Academy is the big winner, the big advancement in that story. So if you think of Woodwings and the trees and the flying and it seems like an oxymoron, but it works. So I'm just rereading some of your comments here. Okay, it's Southern Gothic. They just called him the man's the brand, right? He is the brand. He is, or the seed, or something like that. Yes. Yep. Woodwings very green. Yep. So, I'm really sorry about the first video. I don't know what happened. I practiced with it several times over the last week to make sure that I was getting it right. And I'm literally I have a wall of notes and everything around me right now to try to keep me on track. I was totally prepared, totally ready to do this tonight. And then technology. So thank you guys for coming back. I can't even believe that you guys are all here right now. It's seriously, I'm going to tear up that I have fellow dream singers to talk with. Oh, period of time with the long night. I'd say more months. I'd say more months at this point. Yeah, and I don't think years, because I think he would run into the same issue that he had when he realized that he had to skip the 5-year gap. It's like, what do you do? You come back to these people, and then what has been happening this whole time? And yeah, so I think it'll be more like months at this point. Several weeks, months, more like it, 6. I'm thinking of travel time between everything as well. And then Danny finishing her stuff so she can get back to Westeros. Yeah. Okay, Jill says that she likes the idea of doing per story. I lean towards that. I definitely lean towards that as well, because I already here have 10 pages of notes, and that is the very top, thinnest level of, there's no depth. I couldn't even begin to get into the depth of it. I mean, like I was saying earlier, there's 80 stories to talk about, and trying to condense it down into an hour was just a teaser. Okay, and Stormy says that she likes that idea as well. Okay, so I'm not saying that I'm going to get anything out 2 days from now or even a week from now. So it's something that, yes, Jill, that's a good point. And I did have a link in the first video. I had a link to my reread section of my blog in case anybody did want to catch up. And I can add all of those notes back to here. Yeah, I think that's true. A normal, Shatterjack, I just saw that you said a normal length season. Probably, maybe. Something like that. I want to say that there's even something, I want to say that even if we think back to another story where there's sort of a longish night with the whole dragon battle, which is the Ice Dragon. Why did I have to think about that one? The Ice Dragon story, it things like that happen in a season. Yeah, and the or the length of a season, and there were mentions of seasons. And for a single yesterday, that goes about the length of a season. And actually, and then the story in 7 Times Never Kill Man, there's it's noted a few times exactly which season it is. Things happen to happen in cycles of seasons. So yeah, a couple months, couple short months. What's it all about? Yeah. So I'm up for it. So like I said, we don't even if you get off of here and you want to think about like, how interested are you? Just, shoot me a message because you might forget about it in an hour. And it's like, okay, well, let's go back to talking about myself. Okay, so I guess like any other thoughts or questions real quickly? I know comments are a few seconds behind, so I'm not requiring, I should say, that you guys just waiting for things to catch up. So yeah, and I would say that even in addition to reading the books, the if you want to, there's even Beauty and the Beast series to watch. There are 3 seasons. The 3rd season is the best because it's the most Georgie. It is definitely the most Georgie. The first season, then, and even a bit of the second season, there was still a lot of corporate control as to what could go on in the show. George had much more free reign in the 3rd season. That's a good story to watch. It's not always great, but it's a good story to watch for George content. And if you go online and you watch the Doorways episode, it's only one episode. It's like maybe 45 minutes. Like I said, the video quality is terrible, but you get what you get when it was only ever a pilot, and that was like, I don't know, 30 years ago. I can't remember. It's a long time ago. Thank you, Stormy. Thank you, Sander. It was fun. I can't believe you guys like came back, but I'm so appreciative of that. Thank you so much, because I was prepping for this. So I mean, if you guys have questions or ideas, you know how to get a hold of me. We're at almost an hour and 45 minutes. So I'm gonna free you guys. I'm gonna release all of you Krakens to go do what you need to this evening, or whatever time it is in your corner of the world where you are dialing in from. And I'll add. I have my list of notes, so I'll find all that information and pull it together for you guys. So. Jill, it's 4:20 a.m. wherever you are. That is, you stayed up for this. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you guys. Good night. And you know how to find me if you need me. Thank you so much. Where's my cursor? There it is. There it is. Thank you. It was great. All right. Good night.